Hello, listeners. Thanks for joining us.
How you doing? So today we're talking with Nathan Cox, who's a visual effects artist.
Thanks for joining us, Nathan.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm here.
How you going, man?
I'm not doing too bad, thank you.
Right, so Nathan, we're gonna have a chat with you about one of your favorite movies that you've chosen for us. But before we get into that, just thought we'd have a bit of a chat about, what it is you do and just kind of, the general gist of it. So you're a visual effects artist.
Yep.
So what does that actually mean? Like, obviously, there's so many visual effects artists, and it's a huge kind of thing. What is it that you specifically do?
Well, my position is known as tracking or match moving, and it's really it's just one part of a whole pipeline in making films. It's not so much VFX as it is sort of behind the scenes work to make things work.
Right. So this is pretty much the first step in the pipeline, isn't it?
Yeah, that's correct. Without match moving, without tracking, you can't have your film. But that's sort of, you can say that for any individual part.
That's true. And you've also done roto and compositing and stuff. So you've kind of got a bit of a broad look at the entire pipeline kind of overview.
Yeah, and not only that, but I even studied a bit of 3D generalist stuff back at college.
So what got you into tracking and match move?
It was spontaneous, I think I could say, where I didn't even really mean to get into VFX at all. I wanted to get into games to start off with. So what kind of did get you into VFX? You just fell into it? At college, they sort of run this thing where at the very beginning, you get a choice. Do you want to do game or film? And at the start, I was like, I want to be a, game artist. And then after a year, the college is like, okay, you've had a year. Do you want to stay or swap? And I sort of just preemptively thought that I didn't think that I would have much of a chance to get work in the video game industry. So,
yeah, right. Is there much kind of crossover between the game and visual effects industries?
I think that it's starting to happen more and more frequently, as I've heard that they're actually making films in game engines now. And it's like, okay, I'm all for that.
So you were more interested in games. Was there a particular game or movie that kind of made you think this is what I want to do, or?
It's just all a bit of everything, where it's like a bit of BioShock, a bit of Red Dead Redemption, a bit of League of Legends on the PC. And it was like, I just wanted to be a part of it in some way.
Yeah, that's cool. That's one of the things I really admire about you is you kind of movies would come up and you'd be like, I've never seen that.
Yeah.
Now that you're working in this industry, have you started to watch movies differently?
Oh, yeah. I watch so many more movies now than I used to. Just looking at directors, that I may have well not even heard of before. Yeah, just people say, this director's good. You better watch some of his stuff. And I'm like, you know what? I will.
Are you drawn more towards kind of VFX heavy films as that's your industry, or are you just more into films in general now?
Probably just more films in general. Last year, I think it was, Valerian came out, but I didn't see it because of the VFX. I just saw it and then was like, wow, that really blew me away visually. Same with Star Wars, Last Jedi, etc. Visually, they're incredible films, and I think that it just adds on top of all things that make a film. So I wouldn't go out of my way just to see a visually stunning film, but it really helps.
Nathan, what I'm getting your take on, do you have any kind of preference, or do you just kind of appreciate both? There's things like Valerian, which it is meant to be a very at-you visual kind of film up against something I'm a David Fincher nut.
Okay, yeah.
I love his work with visual effects because so much of it is hidden, and the whole point of maybe a good edit or something, the point of it is that you don't notice it.
Yes, for sure.
Is there one that you really love more than the other, or just...
That's actually a really good question. I think that personally, as sort of someone working in VFX, I have sort of a real appreciation for that invisible compositing VFX style stuff where people are watching and they're like, they might say something along the lines of, VFX is garbage in films these days. Get rid of it. I just want to see a classic. And then you go back to those classics and you're like, hang on a minute, there's VFX strewn all through it. You just didn't notice it. And that's why maybe that does sort of point at, I do like hidden style stuff.
Do you think that you notice things more now because you kind of know how the inside works? Like, do you look at some movies that other people think are fine and you think, God, that looks like shit?
I think yes and no. I think that's part of the enjoyment of film where you're just like, I'm here, this is happening, it's real, even though there's, monsters and magic flying around on the screen. Like, that's what I think it's all about. You do see things and you're like, that's pretty bad, but sometimes you try and turn a blind eye to that. So sometimes it just seems that it's better to not be so scrutinous.
So I guess what are some of the challenges of the job? Like, for people who don't know what match moving or tracking is, which is probably plenty of people.
Yeah.
Just
it's me. Like Billy's tried to explain it to me. Like, I'm like, well, I don't know. It's like computers.
Just give us like a broad overview of what that is and what some of the kind of challenges with that can be.
How to explain match moving is probably, it's in the very general overview. It's just recreating the physical camera that they used on set in CG or in 3D pretty much. So say they have their particular shot that they've set up with this particular camera, with this particular lens. They shoot the shot however it was directed to be, and then it's our job to track features within that shot on the plate that they have shot, and then transfer that data into generating a 3D camera that is exactly the same with the same lens that they used. And that way, the CG that's set for the film will actually stick on the plate and look like it's actually there in the movie that you see at the end.
Yeah, and as we all know, visual effects would be great if it weren't for the actors, right? Like, is that the worst part? Is that what makes shots the most challenging?
I think that, yes. I think that I would say that, because obviously you can't track an actor because they're covering the static parts of the backplate. It's terrible because they'll either run in, stand right up in front of it, and they're always moving. So
yeah, and so obviously due to NDA, I'm guessing you can't tell us anything about like what you're working on. But how many projects are you working on at the moment?
So I can say that we're working on 4 at the moment.
Wow.
Yeah.
That seems like a lot. Is that common for houses to work on that many at one time?
Gosh, I'd say that it is probably common, but in my experience, which is still fairly limited, it depends on the company and what they're currently trying to achieve. I would say the majority of companies who are trying to make money and trying to train up their artists, they want to get at least 2 projects running side by side.
So one of the things, Nathan, that I didn't know about you when we first met, and I just thought it was awesome when I found out, is as well as like visual effects, you run a really successful YouTube channel narrating creepypasta.
Really successful. That's awesome. I think we can use in quotations.
It's pretty cool, man. Like, so what got you into that?
Oh gosh, I think that I started in 2012. YouTube sort of had a very select top level sort of group of people, which were like people that you might have heard of, like PewDiePie. He has been like the forefront of YouTube for years now, and back in 2012, I was inspired by him. I wanted to do stuff like him. And then I'm not sure, at some point, I'm pretty sure that since I was doing the whole horror game thing, it came up to a point where there was sort of like a crossover, like a video game that was also inspired from a story, like a creepypasta. And I was like, oh, you know what? I don't think anyone else is doing stuff like this. So I'll read the story beforehand, then play the game. And then I started seeing people saying stuff like, oh, I enjoyed the story more than the game. And I was like, oh, shit, well, maybe I'll just read stories. And then I pretty much just did that from then on.
Because it's actually pretty awesome. Like, I listen to a lot of audiobooks and podcasts and stuff, and I've started just listening to your stuff, like, like at nighttime, like creepy stories. Like, it's actually pretty fun.
Oh, that's really embarrassing.
No, that's cool, man.
It's enough talking about me.
The other big thing I know about you is that you love anime.
I do.
So the movie that you've chosen for us to chat about this week is is a very recent anime called Your Name. Did you watch this movie because you're an anime fan, or were you just like, had you heard about it? Or
definitely both. Like, I mean, being an anime fan, you can't not have heard of this movie. It's pretty much just been the biggest movie in all of anime, like, recently.
Yeah, it was pretty soon after it came out. It's now like the 4th highest grossing film of all time in Japan, the 7th highest grossing traditionally animated movie anywhere.
Wow. Yeah.
And it overtook Spirited Away as the highest grossing anime. It's pretty insane how popular this movie.
I did see, when I was kind of just reading up some stuff about it, I did see that it single-handedly accounted for 10% of the Japanese box office that year.
Yeah, that's insane.
That's staggering.
Yeah, it's like the first non-Studio Ghibli movie to earn more than 10 billion yen at the box office.
Which means nothing to me.
10 billion.
So would you say that this is one of your favorite movies?
I think that it's definitely one of my favorite anime movies.
So, I mean, this is made by Makoto Shinkai. I mean, his animation... Did either of you guys see Garden of Words?
I have not seen it, but I've heard about it.
Yeah, so that was his previous movie. If you haven't seen it, you should check it out. That is some of the most beautiful animation I've ever seen put to film. Like, there's actually a website, I can't remember the URL, where it will just give you a random frame from that movie, just to kind of show you that, like, every frame is as good as a painting. Like, it's so beautifully drawn.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm guessing that both that and this were traditionally animated, but using computer painting and stuff.
Yeah. From what I could see, they did definitely a bit of both.
Yeah. So Your Name, I didn't know about it before Nate.
So you hadn't heard about it?
I hadn't heard about it. I knew nothing about it until Nate told me I had to watch it. And so it's the story. I mean, it starts off at least the story of these two young people who are mystically linked and wake up in each other's bodies periodically. And then there's a greater story to be told in this sort of, what it reminded me of was it kind of Donnie Darko sort of way of trying to go back and avert disaster. And for me, anyway, I don't know about you two, but the story does sometimes feel very different from kind of chapter to chapter, if you will.
Yeah, it's definitely got some big shifts in it where it almost changes pace and style and everything. So it starts off almost as like a light comedy.
Oh, yeah.
And then there's a point about halfway through where it very much shifts into kind of sci-fi drama territory.
Yeah. Personally, I was much more into the second half of the movie than I was the first.
Yeah, so
the first half.
Watching this movie the whole time, I was sitting there going, I'm loving this. I am 100% sure that Topher hates this movie.
Hate's a pretty strong word. I was like, honestly, if this was the late 90s and the Olsen twins were in this, I was like, this could go straight to television.
Half.
Yeah. Well, not even the entire first half, just the back and forth with the body switching thing.
Yeah.
And I was like, from the intro to the film, which is this kind of mystic, moody, asteroid coming through space, you don't know why kind of thing. And I was like, oh, this seems cool. Yeah. Good work, Nate. And then I jumped into this, almost
kind of teen love story.
Yeah, and I was like,
I love that.
And I was like, what have you done to me now? And then 45 minutes later, I was like, oh, I'm really into this again.
It reminded me of. Did you ever see that Australian movie? Was it Dating the Enemy?
I never saw it, but I know of it.
Claudia Carvan and Guy Pearce. Bodies.
Yeah,
it was like that.
Isn't it Claudia Carvan? I think you've gone a bit highbrow with Carvan. Claudia Carvan.
Oh dear. I loved this movie from start to finish. I really liked what it was, and then I liked it even more when it kind of took that shift in the second half.
Yeah, the thing I like most about it is the visuals. It's a great looking movie.
It is. But it's also very understated. Like, for a fantasy movie, there's a lot of just people in a city or in a village or something.
Yeah, and even now I don't know if this is the correct terminology really with an animation, but the shot selection is great. The place where the director chooses to put the camera, as it were, is actually really interesting a lot of the time.
Yeah, that's true. Nathan, did this feel like a kind of traditional anime to you? Because one thing I noticed is it's much more fluid than most anime. Like, I feel like there's a lot more frames than most anime. Sure. It was very smooth.
No, definitely. I don't actually know what it's called, but there's a word for the particular style of animating in some parts of the film where instead of just doing like keyframes, they actually redraw the shot every time. Yeah, every single frame they draw it again and again. And that kind of animating is really beautiful. And of course, it costs heaps, so they can't do it all the time. But
yeah, well, I actually saw Shinkai come out about this, saying that he is so unhappy
oh yeah,
with the animation in this film. Came out saying that he would because he's such a perfectionist. Just came out saying that this is nothing compared to what it could be had he had another 2 years and more money.
I saw that same thing as well.
That just seems crazy to me, because this is such a beautiful looking movie. All right, so it's still kind of a bit unclear as to what you thought of this movie. What were your thoughts on the love story aspect of it?
That I quite liked.
Yeah,
actually,
I thought that these people were linked together.
Yeah, because even though they're both the male and the female are both teenagers, it's not this young hormones out of control hornbag thing going on.
Yeah,
it's actually this really tender sort of.
Yeah, it's so interesting the way that this love story happens, because they just wake up one morning and their body swapped, and this just starts periodically happening randomly for who knows how long. But at the start, it's not even like they've never met each other. They're in totally different places. She's in a very traditional old Japanese village, and he's in the bustling city of Tokyo. Yep. At first, I kind of thought that what they needed from each other and the reason for this body swap was more kind of to see how the other half lives. But it wasn't about that. At first, I thought it was more about, okay, he needs to see what it's like to not be a spoiled, city dweller, and she needs to experience the big city. But it actually was so much more than that even.
I have a question for you, Billy.
All right, go for it.
I want to know how many times you cried.
Yeah, I cried for sure. I cried. How early did I cry? I don't think I cried in the first hour 10, although I might have had a little tear. But definitely the last.
Not the pop song at the beginning?
Not the pop song at the beginning. Possibly the pop song with about 20 minutes to go.
Oh, yeah.
The movie is kind of interspersed with kind of random pop songs, which I actually quite like, but I knew that Toby hated it.
It doesn't work for me.
No.
Yeah, see, but you are not a big anime watcher. As an avid watcher, Nathan, you would know that kind of stuff happens constantly.
Definitely.
Whereas I've seen maybe 10 in my life.
Yeah.
So I was like, moody, 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 pop song. What?
Yeah, I definitely cried. I love stories when, they go to write their names on each other's hands in that kind of twilight period where they, I guess, spoiler alert, about halfway through the movie, you find out that not only are these people body swapping, they're actually living 3 years apart as well. And not only that, her entire town was destroyed by a comet 3 years ago. And so she's actually no longer, she's dead. So what the movie becomes is Taki the boy basically trying to find a way to change that. So it becomes this really interesting blend of not only body swapping, but kind of time travel. And it's very magical. But so there's this moment about towards the end, I guess, where he's managed to reattach that kind of connection he has with her, and they get to physically meet for a brief moment, but they know that their memories are kind of fading, so they go to write each other's names on their hands. And 10 minutes later, you find out that he didn't write his name. He wrote, "I love you."
And I was like, Billy is weeping.
I loved it because it was that was what transcended time. It was their love. If he had actually written his name, it probably would have vanished off her hand and she wouldn't have even remembered it anyway. But because he wrote, "I love you," that's what kind of stayed with her. And, I thought that was beautiful.
The way you put that just now was perfect as well. I love that.
And I loved that not at any point in this movie could I predict what was happening next. Were you guys the same?
No, my only thing was Billy will cry again.
Plot-wise, you didn't know.
No, I did. I really liked the point where when you before you know that they're separated by 3 years, when he first goes to call her, and obviously he can't connect to her phone because it's buried under a comet. Which was not what I was expecting to happen. And I was like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So you didn't find that shift jarring?
The shift from the kind of almost teen comedy thing to the second half of the film. It is kind of jarring, but I suppose because I welcomed the change, I didn't care.
Did you welcome the change because
I wasn't that into
you weren't
that section? Yeah.
Does that at all put a damper on your kind of overall view of the movie? Having seen the second half, do you now enjoy the first half more?
No. Got that.
I don't know if you guys know this at all. Did you guys know that this is getting a live action remake?
I did read about that, and I am very
you're against
No,
it?
I'm not against it. Gosh, I'm not sure what to say.
What did you think of Ghost in the Shell last year?
I
mate?
haven't seen it. I'll be honest, I haven't seen it.
Probably don't.
Probably don't?
It's not, to be honest, it's not. I didn't think it was horrible, but it's not good.
I've been told many things. I've been told don't see it. I've been told see it for the sake of it.
To be honest, my biggest gripe with it is the fact that, like I said, I don't think it's a horrible film. I think it was just entirely like meh. And to do something that's meh from that source material is pretty criminal. It would almost be better if it was like aggressively bad. Instead of just
at least you could just forget it.
Yeah, instead of walking out of the cinema and shrugging your shoulders.
No.
I was like,
Did either of you guys see the Death Note live action?
No.
Also not good. And that's a shame because, the source material for that is amazing. I don't think that lends itself to a film, though. Even the Japanese live-action version of that was not very good. But did you guys know who's attached to the live-action remake of Your Name?
a bunch of white people.
It is definitely
Oh,
white people.
no, really?
J.J. Abrams has optioned this. Yeah, so he's remaking this. Supposedly, they're going to start shooting pretty soon.
Wait, they can't be shooting really soon. He's writing a Star Wars movie. Like, he pitched Lucasfilm the day that Last Jedi came out.
Maybe this was going to be his next project, and then once he got...
Yeah, he was probably going to go straight into it, and Lucasfilm backed the truck up, dumped all of the
Dumped all
money
the
on
money
his
on his
door,
lawn.
and he's like, okay, Your Name can wait. Then Call Me By Your Name came out. He's like, okay, probably better if there's some distance here so we don't confuse people.
How do you guys feel about... Do you think that you would enjoy that more, Toph?
No, I wouldn't have thought so.
No?
Especially not if it is the Olsen twins.
I mean, my other question is, I wonder, especially given that this is white people, kind of Japanese culture and heritage plays quite a large part in this film. She grows up in a very traditional village, and a lot of, they go through this whole thing, like when she's making the sake traditionally and stuff. What are they going to do?
Which is kind of, it's a key plot point.
Is she going to make moonshine in a fucking bathtub in Wyoming or something? I do wonder how they're going to adapt, because it's not that this film is, I don't think that this is as cultural as something like Spirited Away. We had that discussion with Spirited Away about how much were we missing by not being part of that culture. I didn't feel that so much with this movie. I felt like it was more universal than that. But at the same time, their culture is a pretty important part of it.
Like it's all entwined deep within. Like she is literally a shrine maiden, and that
that's right.
Yeah, that sake that she makes is then taken over to that really spiritual, what was it, the underworld area. And inside,
and it's kind of implied that that's not necessarily the cause of this magic body switching, but a large part of it. Like she talks to her grandma, and her grandma says the same thing happened to me. It comes with being a shrine maiden, which makes me wonder how much they're actually going to keep, which makes me think it's probably not going to be very good.
Lots of lens flares, though.
Lots of lens flares. More lens flares than you can poke a lens flare at.
But interestingly enough, they actually used the lens flares in a sort of they really did use them well, in order to sort of divide the frame.
I mean, as Topher was saying with the kind of shot choices, I don't know if cinematography is exactly the right word for an animated movie, but it was very well done. The way the camera moves, when he discovers that kind of shrine and the camera kind of pans around, the parallax and everything in that shot is just gorgeous. It's so well animated that you would actually believe there's a camera there. I actually wondered to what extent elements of this film were kind of CG blended with 2D. I know he did some of that for Garden of Words, particularly there's a lot of rain in that movie, so rain reflections on sidewalks and stuff. So I do wonder how much of that was done for this film, or how much of it was just traditional hand animation, because if it's hand animation, that's detailed camera work. All right, so I guess I'm so curious to find out what you... I still feel like I don't know what you actually thought of this movie, Toph. So what's your rating for it?
I liked it. I'm on a 7 out of 10.
Oh wow, that's higher than I was expecting.
Yeah, so and like I said, there's a fair chunk of this film which I didn't necessarily dislike it, but I wasn't particularly into. And so overall, even though I don't love the movie, but I did like it, and it gets up to a 7 with me because I do find the film actually, particularly at the back end of it, it's quite affecting. It really is.
It's emotionally,
taking into account how kind of the point of the movie is to move you in some way. Yeah. It completely succeeds there for me.
You didn't cry, though.
I didn't cry, but I'm dead inside. So.
Did you watch it alone, or did you watch this with someone?
I watched it by myself.
And even though you were all alone,
even though I didn't need, even though I could just
cave, you still didn't shed a little tear.
Nothing, mate.
Wow, heartless fucking animal. I mean, for me, this was a 9. I really, really, really enjoyed a lot about this movie. Yeah, I thought it was great. What about you, Nathan?
I gave it a 10 out of 10 right off the bat, but I rewatched it for this interview just so that I would know what I'm talking about and know what you're talking about. And I actually lowered the score because I was like, I didn't think that it was as perfect as I thought it was on second reviewing. But I didn't bring it down much, to be honest. I brought it to a 9 out of 10. So I'm sitting with you, Billy.
What was it that dropped it down for you?
I think that the plot, which I thought was so fresh and so sort of like, I don't know, like it seemed so hard-hitting to me the first time I saw it. The first time I saw it, I won't lie, I had the waterworks going. But this time...
Yeah, you're a crier like me.
But this time I was like, I didn't. I was just like, that's strange. Like the music was really... It emotionally affected me. I was getting the chills and I was like, but it didn't get me as much. I wanted to sort of speak about the music. So Yojiro Noda is the lead vocalist of the rock band Radwimps, and they're the guys who made those little pop songs that you heard. Something that you have to know about Kimi no Nawa, or Your Name, is that it has both a Japanese dub and English subs with straight-up English dub, you know?
Yeah. So we both watched the Japanese with the English subs. But I've heard that the dub is actually pretty good.
Yeah, and there's lots of online controversy about watching subbed or dubbed anime, and personally I prefer subbed. Nothing against the dub, because it's really big. Like, people, they will fight to the death about this stuff. But something that I thought was really interesting was that the love that's put into this translation in the English dubbed version of Your Name, it features all of the Radwimp songs that were reprised by the band in English. So, yeah, you have the Japanese singing, songs in the Japanese dub. Then in the English dub, they remade the songs.
In English? So how similar are the lyrics? Because I often wonder this with translated songs. If it's designed to rhyme in one language, how do you translate that and still make it rhyme? Like, are the words...
The words are definitely different. And it's mostly interpretation and then also them working it so that it does rhyme. So in some cases, there may just be more syllables that they have to add in a shorter amount of time to make it so that they can fit in a word to rhyme.
That's like, did you guys know that 99 Red Balloons was only released in English in Germany, and everywhere else in the world it was released in German?
Oh, shit.
Naturally.
As you do. Yeah, isn't that weird?
Ages ago, I remember hearing that guy, casting back to the 90s, Eagle Eye Cherry, Save Tonight. Yeah, so he's Swedish, but he wrote in English because he's like, Swedish just sucks to write songs in. It's so hard to
rhyme.
Yeah, I don't know whether it was the rhyming or something. He's like, English just way easier for songwriting. Hence, a lot of people probably didn't realize that he wasn't either British or American or whatever, because once everyone's singing, you kind of ditch your accent. Everyone just sounds the same.
You've got that neutral accent when you sing.
Yeah, but apparently, so some languages just a bastard to write music with.
Huh, that is interesting.
Something that I just completely brushed over while watching it. But from what I've heard, that licensing in Japan is notoriously complicated. Other anime make changes to brands in their shows, like, McDonald's being WcDonald. In the case of Your Name, they try to add like a touch of real-world fidelity, and in just a one shot right at the start, it lasts less than a second, Shinkai was able to acquire the licensing rights to display the correct names and brands of the buildings in the area of Shibuya. I can't imagine what kind of crap they went through to get those licenses, but it was all just for that one shot. And to quote a really well-known reviewer's words on this film, I've seen Makoto Shinkai accused of style over substance filmmaking, but here the style is the substance. The sense of awe, the intangible emotional pain you get when you see something this colourful, vibrant, and beautiful is in part what the film is about.
So here's a question for you. let's say that this wasn't an anime. Let's say that it was the exact same film, but it was live action. Do you think that this movie would be half the movie it is?
That is...
Because that's how you really answer the question, is the style a part of this substance? Because I'm going to say yes. I don't think this movie would be half as good if it was live action.
God, I don't think that I'd be able to comment unless it actually happened.
Do you think that you, like, I know you wouldn't have sat through the first half of this film, though.
The only film that I've ever really stopped watching was Reindeer Games.
And that is a crime. Because that's...
Yeah, that film is a crime. You're right. So if I'd started watching it, I probably would have sat through it, even though the first half of the film, not even the entire first half of the film, just parts of the first half of the film, I'm not in love with.
So is there anything in particular in that first half that you can point to that you didn't love, or is it just the entire thing in general? Just
that section of the film has a very different feeling.
It does.
To the parts of the film that I like.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't for me.
Well, thanks so much for joining us,
Thanks for having me.
Remind us of your YouTube channel.
Natnator77, if you want to check it out.
Well, until next time, if you want to reach us, you can do that at bearsonfilmmailbag@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook at Bears on Film Podcast, Instagram at Bears on Film Podcast, Twitter at Bears on Film Pod, or you can find us at bearsonfilm.net. And if you liked it, be sure to give us a rating on iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you can rate podcasts.
Thanks for joining us, Nate.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, man. Bye.